I thank all the participants in Khaki for giving me an opportunity to share my views on my work on Sopara. And today we'll be mainly talking about how archaeological and literary sources provide us a valuable information about the site of Sopara over the period of time. How has it evolved gradually in last 2,300 years as an urban center? So when we talk about Mumbai metropolitan region, Sopara is one of the important cities which we know, which has a history, urban history of 2,300 years. So I always say that Mumbai by nature is urban, by identity is urban. So Mumbai metropolitan region has an urban history of 2,300 years. Now, I, in the beginning only, would like to thank MMR HCS, Mumbai Metropolitan Region Heritage Conservation Society, and Nira Adarkar and Professor Arunachalam for like I've used some of the visuals from their work. So Mumbai Metropolitan Region Heritage Conservation Society has come up with a book, Multiplicities, which will be available soon in the market. So I've just used visuals from that book, in which I have written around half of the book, comprising around 200 pages, primarily focusing on the pre-Portuguese history of Mumbai metropolitan region. Now, when we talk about Sopara, Sopara is something which is very close to us, but like physically close to Mumbai, but one of the most neglected areas. One of the most important thing which we should know about Sopara is the landscape of Sopara is not as it is in ancient period. Primarily, it was a group of numerous islands which allowed this port city to flourish. This map, which is a reconstruction based on the work of various scholars, we tried our best to give us give the Sopara, the geography of Sopara, which was in 2300 BC, when the Lord, when the King Maurya, the Mauryan King Ashoka had probably visited Sopara. So these are the red dots which you see are important places in the Sopara region, where we have Edwin Caves, which I will be shortly talking about, which we have discovered somewhere around 8 years back. Then the area of Agashi, the Sopara, Gas, and Nirmal. Then we have we have archaeological site of Jivdan Caves. Then we have Basin Fort or Vasai area, and then we have Dargah on a small island. So there are two small islands, the island of Edwin, the island of Dargah, and then in the south we have Dharavi and Ghodbanda. So going beyond Jivdan Caves, we have this this area leading towards Vajreshwari, which is another cultural hub which I might be touching upon if the time permits. Primarily, we need to understand that as this was an island city, it had various accesses from sea. And there is a text called Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, which gives us a detailed description how the port of Sopara can be approached. The text was written in first, second century AD. We believe that it was first century AD. It was written, it was composed by an Egyptian Roman citizen who used to travel India very frequently. And this text is kind of a guidebook. I'll be talking more about it in the due course. These are the three most important sites when we talk about Sopara. Now, Sopara being a port city, entire habitation over the period of time has evolved, settled, and flourished on the banks of such rivers, such lakes, which are sort of paleo channels of old sweet water, you can say minor river systems, or you can say streams. So there are numerous lakes which are known to us, and from medieval period, not less than 70 plus lakes which were listed, which were documented in the Portuguese and pre-Portuguese period, known to us from this particular islands, group of islands of Sopara and Basin. So most of the archaeological material coming to us from of the pre-Portuguese period comes to us from the you can say the silt of these lakes. During the medieval periods, during the Dark Ages, I will say, um, uh, most of the ancient remains were, you can say, like they were to maintain their sanctity. Many sculptures or structural fragments were just submerged in the in these lakes. So every year or every time when we clean these lakes, we come across more and more data. Apart from this is a rich region in archaeological sites, as I say. So in the recent studies, we have come across numerous archaeological sites which are highly disturbed, going back to Satavahana period. And many of them are dated on the basis of numismatic evidence coming from the site, as well as some pottery and some structural remains. So not less than 17 sites which we know from the vicinity of three important localities called Sopara Stupa site, which is a protected monument of Archaeological Survey of India. Not far from this Sopara site, over here, if my cursor is visible, there is another site called Takipada, which is also a stupa site or an archaeological mound, which is protected. Then there are loose sculptures which which were reported from Chakreshwar Mahadev Mandir, or Chakreshwar Talav or Tirtha or lake, which are today kept in the vicinity, in the area of Chakreshwar Mahadev Mandir. So this is a core of ancient Sopara. Usually monasteries settle on the periphery of habitational sites. So we know that this is the monastic site, the part of which not even, I will say, 10% of it is preserved today, because when we did survey, we could actually see the extent of the site even in the neighboring field and the habitational area. But we are sure that over here, this is the actual area where ancient habitation coming from Mauryan and Satavahana period, like people were settled over here. How do we know that? Obviously, the extensive survey has given us the evidence of a particular type of pottery, which we call it as red polished ware, coming from early historic period. And then we have found some typical dressed decorated saddle cones, stones, from the area, which are the marker with a particular decoration, which are markers of the Satavahana period, indicating a very, you can say, how can I say that is a simple question. Both the edicts are found in the debris, or rather the silt clearance in the Sopara region. This edict was reported from the vicinity of a lake lying just next to the site of stupa, the Mauryan stupa, which we know as today. And other edict is around 500 meters away from this particular place, found again in the silt, like buried in the silt of a lake, in the clearance. You know, so probably most of the data is still buried, and we need to conduct systematic archaeological investigations, which we have been doing since last 10 years. And every year we come across amazing data which surprises us with new finding. This was reported in 1882 for the first time by Pandit Bhagwan Lal Indraji, who conducted excavations at Sopara in the month of January 1882 on behalf of Asiatic Society of Mumbai. Uh, these findings were shifted to Asiatic Society of Mumbai, and except relic cascade and reliquary and the contents of those, everything else was handed over to CSMVS. I thank Asiatic Society of Mumbai for allowing me uh, uh, to use some of the images of relic cascade and bronzes, which I'll be showing in the due course. Now, Sopara was a Buddhist center. The Sutta Pitaka, that is, Buddhists have 3 Pitakas, that is, the boxes of knowledge, as a core early Buddhist literature, which is known as Vinaya Pitaka, Abhidhamma Pitaka, and Sutta Pitaka. The Sutta Pitaka deals with various stories about the Lord Buddha and his followers, various monks. One of the stories coming from Sutta Pitaka is of Purna from Sopara. That is the earliest known evidence coming from literature of Sopara, and where he talks about the region as Sunaparanta, that is the region which is not so civilized, but he would like to visit his own village, own city, own habitation, his own native place, and that is Sopara. So this probably a reference is of the pre-urban Sopara coming to us. At the same time, this story has been narrated again and again in the Buddhist literature. So we'll more talk about the story of Purna in detail in the due course when it comes to interpreting Sopara from the Satavahana and Vakataka period. There is a textual tradition called Vamsa literature, that is Mahavamsa, Deepavamsa, Darthavamsa, and so on. From it's a Buddhist tradition, obviously coming from Sri Lanka, Sinhalese tradition, and this Vamsa tradition tells us that the king Ashoka has deputed a monk called Yona Dhamma Rakshita or Yavana Dharma Rakshita to preach Dhamma after the third Buddhist council. So Professor Dhaulkar has talked about elaborately on this Yona Dhamma Rakshita or Yavana Dhamma Rakshita. Why Yavana? Yavana is basically Ionian Greek, probably settled in Central Asia, became part of Mauryan Empire, got converted to Buddhism, and then became a monk, and then deputed on this particular mission. So Professor Dhaulkar believes that there was a colony of probably Yonas or Yavanas, and so Yavana Dhamma Rakshita was deputed to preach them, kind of thing, by King Ashoka. As a result of this entire exercise, Sopara emerging as a religious center or a pilgrim center, this port city emerged as one of the most significant commercial center in this part. Let me tell all the participants. Probably many of you are aware that Mumbai metropolitan region is a hub of numerous port cities coming from ancient India, ancient period, like Sopara, Kalyan, Thane. Then our own Elephanta Island, that is Gharapuri, and also Chau. Except Gharapuri, all others have been mentioned even in Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. And every detail has been mentioned, like for example, what to be purchased, what not to be purchased, what should be the approximate price of a particular goods coming to Sopara or going from Sopara. what are the goods coming to Sopara from different parts of the world, what are the things which are being exported from Sopara or all other ports which are mentioned in Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. It is interesting to see that by the time of first century BC, Sopara has already come up, already became one of the most important port and commercial center. This photograph which you see is of the protected site of monastery, that is the stupa, the main stupa, the stupa of Purna, and that is probably believed was constructed over the remains of or a piece of begging bowl of the Lord Buddha. Also, it is believed that this is the stupa of Bodhisattva Purna or the monk Purna who lived at Sopara, who laid the foundation of the monastic site. Now, this is a small segment of monastery which has preserved, which comprises of numerous remains of small and big stupas. You know, beyond that, there must be the residential complexes of various monks lived at Sopara once upon a time. So just try to imagine this place like Sanchi, because the size wise this probably was little smaller, little lesser than the stupa at Sanchi. This is an interesting find when Archaeological Survey of India conducted a survey over here, and they conducted a small excavation in the area called Sonarbhat. They came across this image, probably going back to first century BC, which has a very stylistic impact of Shunga art or early Satavahana art, which is displayed. This is presently in National Museum, Delhi, on display. This is an image of a yaksha with his pratyaras and attendants, who is supposed to be the protector yaksha of the city of Sopara. Now, see, these kind of findings give us glimpses of the life and the belief system of people living in the area and in the region. Very few people actually talk about this very important finding, and the fragment which we have, which is on display, is more than you can say around 2.5, 3 feet high. So this is virtually a life-size image of the yaksha, which was reported on the periphery of the monastic site. So I would say that this is at the junction of the monastery and the habitational area. In between, this particular image was placed to protect the entire habitation. Now we know that ancient Indians believed that such demigods, they protect the habitational area. There is a text which is dated to 4th century AD, a manuscript of which has been reported from Central Asia, known as Mahamayuri. And it gives us the list of such places and associated yakshas. Unfortunately, the name of this yaksha is not mentioned in that list. But we know the yakshas coming from Nasik, coming from Pitalkhora, and so on, like Ujjain. So there are numerous places which are mentioned in the text, and the yakshas associated with those places. So this is the Sopara yaksha, probably had its own cultic tradition evolved, the regional cultic tradition evolved in this particular area. I'm sorry, I just did something. Okay. Now, this is a map I've taken from the book, which is a published version of Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. Now, if you observe, this is our India, and like these are the various ports mentioned on the western coast of India, amongst which this is again a cultural, economic hub which you can actually see. So by the end of, or by mid of first century BC, Roman traders realize that there is a season in which in a particular direction the wind flows. Today we call it monsoon. And then they started using these monsoon winds in a particular way to reach to India and to go back to their own countries. So most of them were Roman citizens, part of the Roman Empire, who traveled down to this part of country. How do we know that? So there are numerous archaeological sites which we have found in this particular area where we do get evidence of some seals and sealings written in Brahmi script, or there are certain inscriptions, cave inscriptions also we know from this area, not less than 50 inscriptions I will say, which are in Indian Brahmi, Western Indian Brahmi rather, and talking about people and travelers. So that itself is a very different topic to talk about and discuss. But this is to just give you glimpses how rich this area was culturally and obviously in the material resources as well. Now, Periplus talks about the Sopara being a riverine port. Now, this is again the same map I'm talking about. So, he says there are two openings to the port, and the northern opening, which is today is from the mouth of Vaitarna River, is safer than the southern, because even today Ullas is known for the quantity of silk which is depositing at the mouth of at the mouth of Vasai Creek. Relatively, Vaitarna is safer, and the current which Vaitarna has is much more bearable for the smaller ships. Now, he says that the author's, unfortunately, name of the author is not known to us, but the text tells us that the ships were navigated till the mouth of River Vaitarna, to the creek of River Vaitarna, and then it was guarded by local people to take it to the port. You know, this is something important which we need to understand when we talk about riverine ports, because it is not easy to navigate in the mouth of a river from the open sea, because there are strong currents which might damage the ship. So local person who knows about currents should navigate. The same thing is applicable to ports like Bharuch, which was one of the most important port in the north of Sopara, and it has its own connections, cultural connections with Sopara. There is a Jataka called Suparaka Jataka or Shurparaka Jataka. It is said in that a prince coming to Sopara, whose name was Suparaka, came from Bharuch and settled here, and after whom the city was named as Sopara. Again, I do not see any historical fact, I do not claim that these are historical truths. But this is how the past or the cultural traditions have been perceived by local people in past and narrated to us in the form of mythology. So earliest mythological source which informs about Sopara is Buddhist. So they have a story of Suparaka, or the Prince Suparaka, who led the foundation of the city. But we know that the archaeological evidence tells us that the earliest known urban evidence comes from the Mauryan period, or especially of the period of King Ashoka. Now, probably people used to navigate in this particular Vaitarna river and come down to the small channel, a natural channel, and then this probably was the area of port. We have identified a couple of locations which are probable areas of port, but unfortunately there is no concrete evidence till the day which we have. But we know that there are two areas which are very potentially you can say archaeologically important. One is the Sopara region, Sopara Gas, and other is Nirmal region. So uh, uh, at the mouth of river Vaitarna, we have the periplus. The text tells us that it used to all ships used to be navigated. They used to stop at this particular mouth of this river Vaitarna, and the mouth of this river Vaitarna was well guarded. Believe me, the river Vaitarna, name of river Vaitarna is same at least for last 2000 years, as we know from various literary sources. The name of Ullas river has been changed in the medieval period. Earlier name of river Ullas was Subramani. So they say that Subramani is like Vaitarni is a better river to enter in the area of Sopara port. Now again, the river name Vaitarni itself is a significant title, I will say. In Indian traditions, it is believed that the river Vaitarni flows between the known world and the world of humans and the world of Yama. So this was the boundary of known world in the pre-Mauryan period. Probably that is what it is indicated. Periplus of the Erythraean Sea tells us, except Sopara, the region around this port city was densely forested, and the habitants of that area were tribals. So even today, the northern part of Thana district and Palghar is known as a tribal zone, or Palghar district is known as tribal district, even today. But this tradition goes back to 2nd century, 1st century AD, where Periplus tells us that apart from this area, everything was habited, like the habitants of the region around Sopara are the tribals. And the Buddhist tradition tells us that this region is known as Sunaparanta, that is the people who are not civilized have occupied this area. So the evidence is corresponding with each other. Now coming back to this particular thing, is these ships were properly guarded and there were two guard posts. So this is the Arnala Island, probably used in the ancient period. Unfortunately, no concrete evidence coming from Arnala Island uh, does not help us to talk about anything about use of Arnala in the Sopara in the Satavahana period. But there is a small island over here uh, near a village called Edwin, where we have found some natural caves which are modified in the early period. From their feature, we can stylistically date. And then some remains of early structures on this small island. So probably this was the watch post which Periplus talks about. The author of Periplus talks about. So this gives us the insight in the entire navigation and the trade happening at Sopara. Who were these traders and what were they doing? The evidence coming from Sopara and Kanheri from 1st century BC to 2nd century AD gives us these 5 markers. So there are donors from Sopara, art influences coming from Vadodara, Mathura, then the Gilgit area and Ladakh area, and then the Bactria. So we know that this was a trade route coming down to Sopara from art and archaeological evidences from 1st century BC to 2nd century AD. And if you realize that it links ultimately to the Bactria, which was a major hub on the Silk roads. So I should not hesitate to say that this trade route coming down to Sopara was an offshoot of Silk roads in the early Satavahana period. Now we realize how important the port of Sopara must be. Then that was known as Uttarapatha in literature. In Dakshinapatha, we have various roads linking west coast with the east coast, and there is a network. So there are various passes which even today are in use. So there is one route which links Sopara with Nasik from Sopara, Wada, Jawhar, Mokhada, then Trambakeshwar and Nasik. There is another route is Sopara, Lonad, Naneghat, Junnar. The third route which is Sopara, Kalyan, Ambuli, and then we go to Bhimashankar and then to the Pune area. Then there is another route called Kalyan. Then we have Kondane caves, then Rajmachi and Karla caves. So these routes are still in use. You know, taking people to the Mawal area, which was again very commercially important, agriculturally important, and they were contributing to the prosperity of the region. Now, as I was talking about Sutta Pitaka, I have already given you the glimpses. Shurparaka Jataka I have made a reference to. I'm coming directly to the third point, that is Purnavadana, the text, a story of Purna in the text called Divyavadana, which is supposed to be composed in its final form in somewhere around 2nd to 4th century AD. It is interesting to see that there are various versions as isolated independent texts can be seen, even dating back to Divyavadana, the story of Purna. So it is believed that there are various stories which are compiled together and the Divyavadana text was ultimately formed by a sect in Buddhism called Sarvastivadins in the early period. I won't go into the details of that, but this particular tradition laid down the foundation of a cult of a bodhisattva called Purna in this particular area. And this cult has contributed in the spread of Buddhism in Central Asia, in the Southeast Asia, to a great extent. We'll see in a couple of slides what has happened to this and how it has contributed. But it has its own significance, I will say, in the Buddhist cultural tradition. Purna was a trader from Sopara who ultimately became a monk and laid the foundation of a monastery where Buddha himself had visited. Obviously, this cannot be the historical fact, but to assign sanctity to a particular place, such myths, such stories are woven around those pilgrim centers. So there is a 2nd century AD inscriptions, evidence coming from our own Mumbai. There is a set of inscriptions published in Journal of Asiatic Society of Mumbai by Pandit Bhagwan Lal Indraji, who talks about this particular site. The site is lost today. If I have to tell you about site, this is the site near Malad, where we have Times of India press today, the same hill. So there are two inscriptions which talk about, there is an inscription here which talks about Musalaka, and there is one inscription which talks about Vakkala. So these are the two names which actually appear in the Divyavadana. And these are the two monks which are supposed to be converted to Buddhism by Buddha, as the tradition tells us. This is the depiction of Purnavadana in Ajanta paintings. So this is the city of Sopara, which is depicted in Ajanta paintings in 5th century AD. I'm not saying that this is the actual pictorial depiction of Sopara, but this is how artists pursued the city of Sopara in 5th century AD, that is we know about. And this inscription which you see over here is found at Sopara, and this is the only evidence coming from 5th century AD from Sopara. You know, this is very unfortunate that habitational sites are totally devastated, they are disturbed. So we know hardly anything about this in-between period between Satavahanas and Shilaharas. But this is a scanty evidence coming from, like one from Ajanta and one from, you can say, Sopara itself. This is what I was talking about. This is a Thai painting of 19th century of Sopara, the Buddha's visit to Sopara. So this is the city of Sopara. They have shown in the painting. Thanks to Professor Peter Skilling for sharing this painting with me. It's a 19th century painting, yes, but still this is the story of Purna from Sopara. Coming to Rashtrakuta period, 7th century AD, these are the relic caskets, like which are in the possession of Asiatic Society of Mumbai. This is our real treasure, and these are bronzes which are kept uh, in the possession of Asiatic Society. Our president, Vispi Balapuria, madam, is there with us today. Thanks for joining, Professor Balapuria. These are the 8 bronzes which were reported from the casket, and that indicates that stylistically they have influence coming from the Bengal region of Rashtrakuta, like Pala art, early Pala art, connecting Sopara with eastern coast. Interestingly enough, this suggests that the stupa was opened in 7th century AD. These bronzes were installed in a casket, and the casket was reburied. So in the casket, we have found several gold flowers which are offered to these Buddhas, and a piece of a potsherd, some bones, the pieces of bones, and these bronzes. So this is something significant. Now going to the second chapter, Sopara and Hindu literature. So Mahabharata and Ramayana talks about Sopara, but as we know from the critical editions, these are the interpolations coming from early medieval period added to Ramayana and Mahabharata. There are Mahatmyas which talk about Sopara called Nirmal Mahatmya, which is the city Mahatmya of Sopara, then Tungareshwar Mahatmya and Vajreshwari Mahatmya, which were composed somewhere in the medieval period. And then there is a tradition of Shankaracharya, Narad Upendra Swami of Jyotir Matha. I'm sorry, it is not Jyotish Matha, it is Jyotir Matha, who came here and who took Samadhi in 1690, who settled here in 1693, who took Samadhi at Nirmal. So there is still a temple of his Samadhi. He was the person responsible for bringing revival in Hindu tradition in the Portuguese period. Okay, we'll talk about it later. So these are some of the you can say paintings, sketches from Nirmal Mahatmya. I'm just showing a couple of them here. There are total 15 such I should say miniature kind of paintings or sketches we have in that particular text. Now, recently it has been reprinted. It's printed as a pothi, but the manuscripts of this also, a couple of manuscripts are available for the study, which talks about Nirmal. Now there is a list of 108 tirthas, which is again 108 is a very sacred number to all Indic religions, as we know, given to us in Nirmal Mahatmya. Many of them are associated with lakes and water bodies, on the banks of which we have found numerous Shilahara sculptural fragments. Now, these dots which you see on this particular map, these are the indicators of the fine spots. These are the fine spots of numerous Shilahara sculptural and architectural fragments, either being worshipped or either being used as secondary deposit kind of thing. Like the stones are being used for washing clothes or something like that, or sculptures are being recycled as different gods and they are under worship kind of thing. I will show you a couple of sculptures which we have found in the region and we have documented. Let me tell you, not less than 350 sculptural and architectural fragments we have reported from this area and from these various sites. This is a huge data coming from the Shilahara period. It is interesting to see, thanks to Mumbai Metropolitan Region Heritage Conservation Society, they have sanctioned us a project to document everything which we find in the Ullas River Valley. So Sopara comes up as a major hub even in the Shilahara period as Kalyan comes. We can narrate story of Kalyan on some other day. But these locations, many of them correspond with the locations given of Tirthas in Nirmal Mahatmya. So probably in the early medieval period, this association of Hindu Tirthas and temples with the water bodies, which was earlier Buddhist, was fixed, and it has gradually evolved in early medieval period. These are the two famous sculptures, life-size sculptures from Sopara, Chakreshwar temple. This is Brahma, virtually more than 5 feet high, and the Suraj Sundari, and I lovingly call it Shuka Sundari because she holds a parrot in her hand. These are the masterpieces of Shilahara art. Believe me, you will not see this kind of artisanship anywhere in any Shilahara monument. These are the fragments, and if you imagine, these are the two isolated sculptures coming from Chakreshwar Tirtha. What must be the beauty of that temple to which they belong? Then these are the fragments, this kind of fragments which we have documented from places around Sopara. There are some plinths, there are some pillar fragments, there are some key checkers, pillar brackets. You can actually see the beauty and the delicacy in the carving. So these are the masterpieces coming from Shilahara period. We only talk about Ambarnath temple. We only talk about Khidrapur Kopeshwar Mahadev temple. But these are some of the forgotten masterpieces of the Shilahara art. Unfortunately, I have to take these photographs which are not of good quality, but still, because today these findings have been shifted to some other place. We know where those are. It is not so that they are lost, but how they are found, how they are reported. These are the primary locations. Now, see Gas Dongri. This is a Jain fragment coming from Sonar Bhat area, and these are the memorial. This is a memorial fragment of a memorial stone coming from early medieval period. So these kinds of evidence is coming to us. Now we come to the third chapter of Sopara, and that is Sopara in Jainism. So there is a very old story of Tilaka Sundari, again coming from early medieval period. So I will say that Hinduism and Jainism simultaneously grow at Sopara, but the foundation of Sopara was paved by Buddhists. Gradually, all the religions, as we see at Kashi, as we see at Ellora, all the religions coexisted. They evolved, gradually flourished, and shared their cultural, you can say, traditions. The Sopara is a classic example for that. There is a version of Jain Ramayana called Paumacharya, which talks about the conquest of Sopara by Lava and Kusha. So this entire story of Lava and Kusha getting associated with Sopara primarily comes from the Jain tradition, and then it gets merged into the Hindu tradition. Interestingly enough, this is also documented in the oral tradition of local tribals and local folk songs as Hindu and Jain, both the traditions. And the tribal tradition as a third tradition. In Jain cultural tradition, it is believed that Sopara was a part of Shatrunjaya pilgrimage. Now, Shatrunjaya pilgrimage is one of the most important, very significant pilgrimage in Jainism. So it is said that earlier the Shatrunjaya hill pilgrimage was used to start from Sopara, which now start from Palitana. So the importance of Palitana, what today Jainism has, once upon a time Sopara had in the medieval period. Now, Vividha Tirtha Kalpa, coming from 14th century, talks about Sopara as one of the most important Tirtha. The most important thing about this Sopara is it is believed that Lord Adinatha's image, the Jivanta Swami image of Lord Adinatha, was installed in Sopara till 14th century. That is what Jainas believe. I'm again not saying that everything is a historical truth. This is how they have expressed their perceptions in a form of myth. So every myth has its own cultural context and cultural significance. So what is Jivanta Swami image? Jivanta Swami image is a unique concept in Jainism. It is believed that the image is made when the Lord Adinath was alive. You know, obviously, there is no such image which is found, or the Lord Adinatha's date is also controversial. So let us not go into the details, but it is to claim the antiquity of Jainism at Sopara. You know, then it is also believed that Pethada has constructed a temple, Parshvanatha temple at Sopara. Today, Sopara is one of the tirthas, a very significant tirthas in Jainism. This itself is another topic, like Buddhism at Sopara, Hinduism at Sopara, and Jainism at Sopara. These are the three independent topics to discuss in three different lectures. But there is an image of Muni Subrata Swami, because there are many people who have already talked about the Portuguese occupation of Sopara and Vasai and everything. I will just give you some glimpses about it. So the fort of Vasai was taken by Portuguese from Gujarat Sultans. And then we know that there are two important personalities who lived at Vasai and who have been referred to as saint in Christianity. You know, Saint Francis Xavier and Gonzalo Garcia. These are the two famous Christian personalities associated. So we have Buddhist bodhisattvas, we have Hindu stories associated with Parshuram, Ram, Lavakusha, and Pandavas. Then Jainas, we have Adinath, Parshvanath, and Subrata Swami. And then in Christianity, we have Father Francis, Saint Francis Xavier, and Saint Gonzalo Garcia. So this Sopara emerging as a commercial center, as a pilgrim center, and also as an administrative headquarter in the early medieval and medieval period, to talk about it, makes this particular city a cultural capital, evolves with coexistence, and ultimately the climax of which can be seen in the cultural synthesis. Now, this is a unique classical example of a true Indian cultural tradition which believed in synthesis and gave a unique flavor to the regional culture. So, Sopara was and is a cultural hub, cultural capital of North Konkan. Though the Mumbai is economic capital, Sopara is a cultural capital of North Konkan even today, because the way culturally Sopara evolving even today is unique and emphasizing the synthesis of various past and present traditions. On Sopara, and this is a tale of a story which was a capital of this region for around 2000 years. Thank you. Thanks a lot for the patient listening.
Thank you very much, Suraj. It was a fascinating journey over so many millennia, if I take them now, if you're okay with that. So, first of all, I'll start off with the most recent question. How did Sopara get changed to Nala Sopara?
See, there are two villages called Sopara and Nale.
Okay.
You know, and it is a norm in Indian Railways since the beginning that this railway station should be named after the nearest village.
Okay.
As we know. So they named it as Nala Sopara. So it became
Okay.
Nala Sopara.
Okay. You mentioned about the geography. You started off with the geography, and there was a question, two questions actually in connection with the geography. The first is from Kaiwan. He wanted to know, was the reclamation of the creek between Sopara and mainland a natural process, or was it actually man-made?
Mostly it was natural. In the
Okay.
recent past, some reclamation has happened, but most of it is natural. And
Okay.
there are references coming to us from archaeology and literary sources about how that creek, that channel got silted, you know. And
Okay.
there is a systematic study which is going on the
Mm-hmm.
siltation process.
Okay. Um, you mentioned that there are 70 odd lakes in that area. Are all these water bodies that still survive from what was once the water bodies surrounding the islands?
Most of the lakes are in danger situation, as which has happened in Thana also. Uh,
Yes.
uh, Many of those have lost their identity. So in last 20 years, I have seen this is happening in the process of urbanization. But yes, there are a few lakes which are still surviving. Like the larger ones are still there. The smaller ones have lost their identity or existence.
Yes,
Was
but Kaizad's question was all these 70 lakes, are they remnants of what was once water bodies which surrounded the island? Or were they man-made is his question.
We really do not know, but many of them are natural depressions, as geological
Okay.
study tells us. Like those which I showed you in one of the slides as a row of lakes. That is the natural,
Yes.
like it's a paleo channel of some water body. So that is a
Okay.
natural depression. But there are some
Okay.
man-made also, because there is a reference of a construction of a reservoir in
Okay.
Nasik inscription coming
Okay.
from first century AD. And the reservoir was constructed at Sopara, which is known as Ramatirtha. And interestingly enough, even today, the place is known as Ramatirtha.
Okay. Um, this following question is more general in nature. You said that archaeologically we can date this area to about 2,300 years. And you also said that mythologically Sopara is mentioned in early Buddhist texts, for which we had no tangible archaeological evidence. So, if one were to go by literary sources alone, to which period can we date this, trace this area? The question is going only by literary sources.
See, literary sources claim that Buddha had visited Sopara. So
Okay.
Buddhist literature tells us that it is at least 5th century, 6th century BC.
Okay.
Jainas talk about Adinatha. So the acceptable dates are 8th, 9th century BC. And if we talk about Ramayana and Mahabharata, date still goes further beyond that. You know,
Okay.
because the accepted date of Kali Yuga, that is the end of Mahabharata war, is 3100 BC.
Yes.
So this mythology doesn't really help us to date.
Okay. So, how would you like to answer Diksha's question? If you were to go purely by literary sources, to which period can we trace the area back to?
I will say not beyond 3rd century BC,
Okay.
because most of these
Um,
interpolations and later literary pieces which have got accepted in the early form, even from the Sutta Pitaka, I will say, the piece
okay.
comes from 2nd century BC, not before that.
The next few questions are in relation to communities. Um, uh, you mentioned you showed fragments and remnants of temples. So the question from Bharat was, who destroyed these temples, or was it like the natural process of
No,
wear
there
and
are
tear? Or
references and there are documents which say that in the Portuguese aggression, those temples got destroyed.
okay, um, is in your research, Suraj, have you come across any Islamic influences in this area?
Sorry.
Have you come across any Islamic influences?
See,
Is
it is very unfortunate that Mumbai metropolitan region won't give you any concrete data coming from pre-Portuguese period of the Islamic habitation. And there is a
okay,
reason behind that. we when we were working on our project on Salset project, Purush talked about it a few days back in the same on the same platform. Uh, 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 See, we realized that when Portuguese arrived here, there are references in literature as well. Even Arab traders talk about it, that the Christian-Islamic conflict was so strong that the primary target was Islam, and then they shifted
Mhm.
to Hindus.
Okay.
Okay, so this is how that has happened. So those crusades which has happened over there, the baggage was carried by them to this area,
To this
and
area
gradually they
also. Okay.
settled, and then there was a synthesis. But by then,
Okay.
Islamic habitation has lost its identity. So most of them have shifted to the neighboring areas where you do not see influence of Portuguese or impact of Portuguese, except one dargah on the island just beyond the Basin Creek.
Okay.
But again, the antiquity is dicey. Gazetteer claims that it is 14th, 15th century, but there is no concrete archaeological evidence to talk about it.
Okay. I think you've answered this question, but Sagar wanted to know, with so much Buddhist influence, why do you say it is obvious that Buddha never visited this area?
Because Buddha never went beyond Ganga and Yamuna Valley in his lifetime.
Okay.
So he spent his entire life in Ganga Yamuna Valley. So at that time, when he was alive, Sopara was not probably known to them. So why would he visit?
Could you take us one more time through the etymology of Suna Paranta? So, as in, how is this word? How did this word
Suna
come about?
Aparanta. Aparanta is a region which is known as North Konkan, the ancient name of North
Correct.
Konkan. And Suna is basically barbaric, not so civilized,
Okay.
or you can say primitive people.
Okay.
So people Suna Aparanta. It becomes that.
Okay. Ashish's question is Sopara the Shurparak region of Parshuram, which is also mentioned in the Mahabharata?
Yeah, the entire Hindu tradition is based on Parshurama tradition. The Rama Tirtha, which is mentioned in Usabadatta's inscription, Nasik inscription, which I just talked about, this Rama is none other than the Parshuram. And entire Nirmala Mahatmya talks about Parshurama's story, and they believe that the creation of Konkan has happened at Sopara. That the famous creation myth of Konkan associated with Parshuram, the Nirmala Mahatmya tells you that this has happened at Sopara, and then Nirmala Mahatmya,
Over there.
Gareshwar Mahatmya, and Vajreshwari Mahatmya. This is a sequel of three Mahatmyas. You need to understand all the three together to understand the impact of Parshuram's story on Sopara. I'll give you an example if time permits. Is it?
Oh yes, please
Can I?
go on.
Yeah. There is another footprint which is depicted, and it is said that this is a footprint of Rama, and the footprint is facing towards the you can say western shore coast on the hill, and the oral tradition associated with it in 17th century tells us that this was the hill from where Parshurama hit the arrow
Okay.
to create Konkan. See, I'm not saying that this is historical fact, but you can see the impact of oral tradition and myths and the Parshuram association is such a deep rooted. Will talked about it, from first century AD onwards. So definitely, it has its own association.
Is there any evidence still remaining in this region about Buddhist guilds, trade guilds? Is Commander Narayan's trade guilds, Shrenis?
Ancient, you mean to say?
Is any evidence still remaining in this region of Buddhist Shrenis?
Basically, there are inscriptions coming from other sites like Karla or Kanheri, where traders and trade guilds are giving donations. They are from
Okay.
Sopara. So we know about people, their names. Rather, the Purna, he was the Bodhisattva Purna. He was a trader earlier, who became monk later. You know, so yeah, there are scanty references, stray references, which we need to, we need to solve it as a jigsaw puzzle. We have to bring all pieces together to get the complete picture. And now we are in the process to get all pieces together. You know?
Abhay's question was the Joshi Pritam the same as Joshimat in Uttarakhand?
Yeah, that is what we believe.
Correct. And
Jyotishmat, I said that was my typo mistake. It has to be Jyotirmat.
you mentioned that.
Myself.
So, what connects Sopara with Mahakali, Kaneri, and Gharapuri? You mentioned Mahakali and Kaneri, but what about Gharapuri?
See, Gharapuri also had a Buddhist habitation, early Buddhist habitation, where we have a monastery was a mother of all these later monasteries, even Kaneri, because the earliest evidence comes from Sopara. And interestingly enough, monastery probably continued till 12th, 13th century AD.
Is
Buddhist
it?
monastery.
Okay. The next question is as follows. Does the name Shurparaka have any connection or relation with Ravana's sister? The person who's asking this question seems to be from this area, Sunil, and he's saying this because elder people from Sopara have stories to share around this claim, oral stories.
Yeah, there is a minor oral tradition which is there, and that is probably because of the phonetic similarity between two words, Shurparaka and Shurpanaka. You know, but early literature specifically tells us, the Puranic literature, Skanda Puran also, these Mahatmyas also, and the Buddhist literature also tells us that the name Shurparaka is given to the region because of the shape of the island, the geographical shape of the island. So, geomorphology of the island, which, because Shurparaka is what we call in Marathi soup, so it is like that.
So there used to be a temple of Parshuram at Bhunj. Was it ever relocated into the hinterlands?
Yes.
And where
most of the temples from Sopara have been shifting. You know, even Vajreshwari temple, what we see today, is not the original place of the temple, as we all know. It has been shifted to the present place in the Maratha period, or Portuguese period, and then Maratha renovated. So yes, this has happened.